Hi, everyone. Typically, we do like to record with couples to get both sides of the story. It is our point of difference. Ebony's husband was unable to join us. Regardless, I wanted to bring this conversation to the table because I think it's incredibly inspiring. We're talking about someone who is such an amazing person, and really her motivation for life and zest in supporting others is profound. And I felt as though it was certainly worth spreading the news and also giving us a little bit of perspective on our own lives. So very excited to bring you this conversation today. Let's kick it off.
Perceptions were that I would struggle because I have a disability, and my partner was very heroic for taking me on and, you know, for having a baby with me, and he was going to be this incredible father.
Hello and welcome to the Parenthood Pod, where our lives and stories aren't perfect, but very real. I'm your host, Leonia Kiddenor, and every week I will bring you conversations that aim to smash the stigma on struggles we face as parents. Let's begin.
Welcome to the show.
Ebony, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you on with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to be here.
Yeah, so you are a mum of 4, which is super mum over there. I've got 2 and feels like a tribe. So I certainly can't imagine doubling that. So I feel you should definitely have some sort of trophy or something for your efforts. But for those listening, Ebony actually has retinitis pigmentosa, which means that she progressively lost her sight since birth and is now completely blind. She also experiences discrimination and now is an advocate for blind women provoking change. So I think that is absolutely amazing what you're doing, Ebony, and I'm very interested in hearing about your parenting journey to date. But what I thought was, let's start right from the start, even before kids, when you first met your partner. Tell me about that time and what drew you to him.
Yeah, so at the time, it was interesting because I was kind of in a limbo space in my life, and I was attracting people that probably weren't the best for me. And it was kind of like I remember the day I actually met him, that day having a big cry to myself and a big release, and like, I just want different. I just want change, and I need to obviously make that change if I want to attract anything different. And that night we were going to a friend's 30th birthday, and that's the night I met him. So obviously the universe was hearing me loud and clear.
Yeah.
And yeah, we met at a friend's birthday party. We chatted a little bit, but I just knew as soon as I heard his voice, because my back was to him, I heard his voice when he came into the room, and I turned around and I was like, oh, who's that? And yeah, I just knew straight away that there was something special about him, and I just felt instantly drawn to him. And then after the birthday, I did a bit of Facebook stalking. I found him, and then I shouldn't say stalking, but yeah, stalking. It makes you sound a bit crazy, but yeah. So I found him. We started chatting, and yeah, that's basically how we met and how things began for us.
Wow. And I'm interested, obviously, at that point in time, were you able to see him at all, or what was your condition like then?
So at that time, I was able to see enough to kind of, I guess in the setting that we met, I couldn't see him at all. It was dark. We were in a sort of pub setting, so I couldn't see him at all. But in those sorts of settings when alcohol was flowing, I found it easier to sort of palm it off as, oh, I'm just a bit tipsy or I'm just a bit drunk sort of thing. Yeah. Whereas when we kind of started catching up and seeing each other, I could never see enough to see people's sort of like fine features and facial features, but I could sort of see enough to gauge where they were. So I guess that's the best way to explain it. I still had less than sort of 5% vision, so minimal to no vision. But yeah, that's what it was like for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess I'm interested as well in, you know, what Are other senses then heightened? For example, are you more acutely aware of sound, of voice, of touch and things like that? Because I'm just curious, I guess, from a dating perspective, you said that, you dated a few frogs. I can so resonate. Then you found the good one. So, what kind of stood out about him, do you think?
Yeah, definitely feel like when you lose a sense, all of your other senses heighten. Mm. For me, I've always honed into my hearing and my sense of like my surroundings, and definitely my intuition, and just kind of intuitively knowing where people are and kind of who's around you from that intuitive aspect. So that's kind of how I navigated dating, I guess. And in a sense, in the past, it was more or less, kind of getting to know people before going out on dates with them and becoming sort of familiar in that way.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think intuition is a huge thing, right? I mean, I can so relate to that as well, sort of that gut feel. So did you always want a big family?
Yeah, I did. So I come from a big family. I'm one of 6. Oh. So Yeah. So I always wanted a lot of children. When I was younger, I wanted 10.
Wow.
Definitely don't want 10 now.
So in that case, was Javi also on board as far as wanting a number of children, a little tribe?
Yeah, he always wanted a lot of children. It was kind of something that we had talked about, but not sort of in depth, but we kind of both knew that we both wanted a lot of children, and we kind of wanted them sort of close together.
Yeah. And how many years apart are they, your kids?
So our oldest is, how old is she? 4.5. And then our second is 3. So they're 15 months apart.
Yeah.
And then the twins are 19 months younger than our middle child.
Wow, that's busy.
Yeah.
So wait, 4 and a
half.
Wow, girl.
So when the twins were born, my oldest was 3.5 years old.
Wow, Jesus, I can imagine that to be a very, very busy household. So just on that then, we all know what the pressure is like when we all of a sudden go from, footloose and fancy free with our partners, just, what are we doing on Sunday for brunch sort of chat, to, oh my goodness, like we are looking after all these humans and it is chaos. And I think that's one of the biggest adjustments, at least that I've noticed, and also when I speak to people about their journey. So I'm just curious, usually what happens, and this is a sort of a common theme that I'm noticing, is that there tends to become a little bit of competitiveness in the couple, right? It's like, oh, well, I've done more of this and you have done, I've done more and therefore I should have more rest. And, even though you're adults and you really shouldn't be thinking that way, there's sometimes a bit of point scoring that happens when you've got kids and you're exhausted and you've got jobs or whatever it is that you're doing outside of that. So I was curious, what is your dynamic like, particularly given, I'm just curious, how does it work and how do you guys share the load?
Yeah, so our dynamic has changed with every new child that we have brought into our family.
Yeah.
So our dynamic at the moment, I would say, is the most harmonious and balanced. But if I'm going to pair it back to when we first started our parenting journey. So I fell pregnant pretty quickly into our relationship. So we were really only like seeing each other for about 2 months. So we were officially dating for 2 weeks and then I was pregnant. So it was very, very quick. Yeah. And I miscarried that pregnancy and then we went on to try again and fall pregnant with my daughter. So when we welcomed her into the world, I would say that I think people's perceptions were that I would struggle because I have a disability and my partner was very heroic for taking me on and, for having a baby with me, and he was going to be this incredible doting father. So there was already sort of those perceptions going into parenting. And for me, having a disability, there's always been those projections of what I cannot do and what I am not capable of. So for me, I've always kind of lived my life feeling as if I needed to prove myself, not only because of my disability, but because of so many other aspects. So going into parenting, I took 95% of the role to begin with. Wow. And that was more to do with me I would say I'm a very maternal person by nature. I would also say that parenting and caring for my children comes extremely naturally to me. It doesn't mean it comes without challenge, but it does come very naturally to me. I've got a lot of younger siblings. I grew up in a family dynamic where there was a lot of sort of trauma and challenge. So I took on the role of the parent at a very young age, even though I do have a disability. So for me, I took on 95% of that role. My partner had his own shit going on at that time. So he was physically there, but emotionally and mentally checked out. So probably up until the twins came, that was our dynamic. And I will say that there were times where I did feel a lot of resentment, where I did feel like, he wasn't kind of contributing as much as I would have liked him to. But then there were other aspects where I did allow him to, I guess go through that process, because everybody deals with the changes of parenting differently, and some people are able to adapt quicker than others.
I'm interested, because you do have the disability, how did that impact you on the day-to-day as far as, I'm sure, for example, having a little baby, they're kind of glued to you and you'd have a sense of, where they are and, things like that. But did it impact your ability to, care for your children because you did need that other person to be physically there too? Or how did it pan out for you?
Yeah, so for me, my partner, prior to the twins arriving, he worked 40-hour weeks. Wow. So I was at home with the children on my own for majority of the time. Yeah. And when my partner came home, depending on what shifts he worked, dinner was cooked, house was cleaned, kids were bathed, and we were ready to go to bed. So basically, for me, growing up, I was never exempt from doing any chores, any housework, any cleaning, any looking after children, anything. I was never exempt from doing anything. So I learned from a very young age to pull my weight. I come from a big family, and I also come from, a reality where we had to do that. So when it comes to having my own children, I don't feel like you necessarily need your eyes to care for your children. Well, I don't necessarily feel like I do. My house, I knew the layout. When my son came along, I had him strapped to me while I chased around my toddler, and I would always stay within the perimeter of my house where I felt most safe. And that's how I would work it.
Wow, that's amazing to me. You're right. You know your home, that's where you sort of do feel safe, but you also know where things are and things like that. So I guess naturally I'm sitting there going, wow, you are sort of cleaning and doing all these things, but, credit to you, as you said, that's all that you knew how to do. So I guess to some extent you may have just, it's just a learned behavior to behave that way regardless. That's what it's sort of sounding, isn't it?
Yeah, because like I said, I was never exempt from doing chores while I was younger. It wasn't, Ebony has a disability, so she doesn't have to do anything while all the other, kids do things. It's like, no, your chore is to vacuum the floor and do the dishes and, you do this like everybody else. So I'm extremely independent and self-sufficient. And really, I think if I can pick the one thing that I probably did struggle with at the beginning was giving my children medicine. Because trying to, obviously read how much medicine they need into the syringe was very difficult, but we worked around it. But out of everything, that was probably the hardest thing.
Wow, that is, that's very impressive. I guess through, potentially a bit of struggle in your childhood, and you built a lot of resilience there. I want to hear about the resentment that you felt when, hubby goes off to work and then comes back and everything's sort of ready to go. I can so relate. Sometimes I'm like, just thank me for cooking cooking dinner, damn it. Like, it's not that easy to get all of this stuff organized. So, and that is a massive contention for a lot of couples. From your perspective, you sort of said that's how he was for a while, and then the twins came along. Was there a point where you just went, you know what, I can't do this, I need your help? Or was it just naturally, as you had another two children, you know, he stepped in? Like, tell me about that transition.
Yeah, so I guess to pair it back to what you were saying before, the resentment ebbed and flowed, and it was more or less feeling like there was this projection, like I was going to struggle and I wasn't going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, and then he was going to breeze through, when really it was the other way around. And that doesn't mean I didn't struggle, but he was struggling, but nobody ever expected him to, or even reached out to support him, because, he didn't have a disability. So he was going to find parenting a lot easier than the partner with a disability. And then I guess moving into how things changed for us, I would say I honestly don't know. It just changed overnight, I believe. We were in a much better place within our relationship. Our communication was a lot better. We had kind of forged this path on our own. I think when you come from big families, and both of our families are families of culture. So I'm Cook Island Italian, he is Māori. So I think, when you come from big families that can often be enmeshed and have a lot of sort of input into how you parent and how you do things, if you're not solid in the foundations of your relationship, then it can be hard to kind of navigate your way through. So when our twins came, probably 6 months before they arrived, there had been a lot of changes in our external family dynamics, and that really helped mine and his relationship. And I think because we were it was almost like everybody had sort of we'd put boundaries in, we had created this sort of distance in a sense where we could do what we needed to do in our roles as parents and not be influenced or impacted by anybody else's opinions. And that really helped us. And then when the twins came, it just changed instantaneously. And I think when we made the decision for my partner to leave work, his job of 9 years, and us to put all of our focus into my career, things changed again, and he has just really transformed into such an amazing father and extremely, present with the children, present with himself. He's a happier version of himself, which I think allows him to be a happier version of a parent.
Yeah, 100%. I'm curious, you have so many things that you've just mentioned there that I want to touch on that, I think will resonate with a lot. Okay, so let's talk about families getting involved and sort of judgy and all of that, because I think I think everyone listening can probably think at least of one person in their life that they're like, mate, you got to back off a bit. So, what has been your experience with that? And do you find that sometimes people want to stick their nose in even more because, as you said, I mean, your perception was, poor old me, or at least that's how you perceived others to think about you, or, she must be really struggling, even though deep down you were like the superhero. So do you think, with that has come even more judgment, or do you think it's also just big families just being nosy? What's your perception?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think it is different for both of our sort of families. In regards to my family, I come from an extremely complex family dynamic. There was a lot of, it was a family violence situation. There was a lot of abuse and trauma in my background. So I feel like in my example, it was more or less putting boundaries in so I could live my life without being controlled or without being consumed by, external family dynamics. Whereas with my partner and people in his extended family dynamic, I think it was more to do with my disability, and that was kind of outwardly acknowledged and, verbally spoken about. And I think it had more to do with my disability and putting those boundaries in, and my partner too putting those boundaries in. So, because I think sometimes depending on dynamics between parents and their children, I know with my partner, he was the only boy in his family. So he kind of stayed in that sort of role up until I met him. So I feel like for him it was kind of forging his own path forward without, having to play that same role anymore, if that makes sense.
Being like the leader of the tribe in a way for his family, or being very immersed in his family, or what? Yeah, in what way?
I think because he was the only boy, there perhaps was an expectation to be the leader of the family. He was doted on a lot. Yeah. So that role of him being taken care of a lot by, the women in his family. So then when he kind of creates his own family, it's a shift in dynamic. Yeah. And I think that can be an adjustment for all parties.
Absolutely. For those listening who, may be feeling a little bit stressed and overwhelmed by, people, family, friends, or whatever it looks like, and it potentially impacting their own relationships, it sounds like now you've found that healthy balance. So I'm just curious, what advice or guidance could you give them if they're sitting in it going, I don't know where to from here because I want to create the bit of distance. It's becoming unhealthy, but I don't want to offend anyone and I don't want to cause family drama. What guidance could you give them?
I think the best thing that I would say is couples therapy really helps.
Okay, yeah.
And just giving that space where you can openly discuss with your partner what's going on with, I guess somebody there to guide the conversation. So you're actually hearing each other, because for a long time, me and my partner weren't even hearing each other. And it was causing conflict because nobody was feeling heard and nobody was feeling seen. So for us, therapy really helped, individual therapy and therapy together. And I would say boundaries and trying to figure out what your dynamic looks like. In my specific situation that I mentioned before with my family, it was more or less taking a huge step back and really looking at, okay, is it going to be a surface relationship or is it going to be no contact, and moving forward from there. And I guess with my partner's family, different dynamics. So it's kind of just putting your boundaries in. And I think that that's something that you have to discuss with your partner and then kind of move forward as a team, because for a long time we weren't working together as a team. We were working separately, and I feel like that was causing more conflict between us.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything you say, I'm just like nodding profusely, because it is, the parenthood game, it's no joke. Like, you're both kind of off doing your thing and just trying to get through the day with all the tasks and all of that. And so it can be very siloed. And, by the time you get to, the kids go to bed, if you're lucky, they go to bed. Sometimes they just keep getting out of their bed like my little one's doing at the moment. So you get no time to yourselves. But, if you're fortunate enough to have a bit of time, it's usually like downtime on the couch, TV on, and sometimes you're just not talking to each other at all. And so that's how that resentment really does build. I'm curious, did you ever feel that he, again, for those listening who potentially have, let's call it either a disability or an illness or something that is sort of compromising, the way in which they're living their lives, were there ever times that you felt as though he was, disgruntled towards you because perhaps you weren't able to be as efficient with something as, you not ordinarily would be? Like, was there any sort of impact there? Because I know I've spoken to people who have said, since I got this illness or since I got, this happened to me, our dynamics really shifted. And sometimes I have this guilt that my partner's frustrated because I can't operate as quickly as I used to, or whatever it looks like. So I'm curious your take on that.
Yeah, I think because when we met, my eyesight was basically what it is now. I have lost more eyesight since we've been together, but it hasn't significantly changed anything. So he always knew I was blind and he always knew what I was capable of. Yeah. I think the only thing that I could probably really think of was not being able to drive anywhere. So, if we had to go to appointments and stuff like that, he would have to come. And I know at the very beginning, that sort of annoyed him sometimes. Yeah. But other than that, I can't really think of anything because, like I said, I've always been extremely independent, and I have, a guide dog, and I have a support worker now within the last sort of 2-3 years. So I kind of just figure out my own way to get around things that I might be challenged with anyway. So yeah, driving's probably the only thing that would ever spring to mind, but that was probably way back when we started dating.
Yeah, I think it's, again, I'm just in admiration as to how sort of, independent and get on with it and, all of that you are. I mean, I think it's, again, perhaps born from a bit of struggle and things like that, but you're certainly, you're such a strong person. And I I want to hear more about the work that you're doing as well, because I can so see how you are sort of trying to enact change and be a bit of a leader in your area. I think it's awesome. I'm curious, the way you parent. So because you grew up in a dynamic where children will do their bit and there's no excuses and get on with it, do you have I guess your kids are still pretty young, but do you intend on having sort of a similar attitude towards everyone's going to chip in and everyone's going to contribute? What are your thoughts?
So for me, I would say that I explain to my children, that we all do work together, but I in no way will sort of punish them or inflict any sort of punishment if they don't chip in. Mm-hmm. So it's more or less at the moment, it's explaining to them what we do as a family and how we all do clean up or how we all do work together. But it's more or less just nurturing them through that as well, because they're 4-3, so they don't always want to clean or help. So I think it's just encouraging them to, but nurturing them at the same time when they don't want to. And I think you show your children more from how you do things opposed to what you tell them. I think they're going to absorb when they see you doing things and when you're encourage them at the same time. So I feel like that's the approach that I'll take.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's so true. They just watch and then they learn. So you made mention of the fact that your husband quit his job and now you're sort of, driving the way for as far as, having your own career and all of that, and your husband's really supporting at home a lot more. I want to hear more about that. So talk to me about what it is that you're doing now and, what that dynamic's is like at home.
Yeah, so I am an intuitive reader and coach, and I have been running my own business from home for over 11 years now. Mm. So it was something that I was doing full-time when I met my partner. However, when we started having children and things like that, I dialed it down between, phases of my parenting journey. And then after the twins came, it just really dawned on us, if we don't make this step, we're not going to ever do it. So the vision was always for my partner to leave work and for me to pursue my career. And that's kind of the decision that we made probably last year in about October. And then my partner handed in his resignation and we kind of just went full into it. So that's sort of what we're doing right now.
So that is really, that's really gutsy, because I think a lot of people sit there going, I want to follow my dream, but, I've got to put food on the table. Like, I don't have necessarily the luxury of sitting there going, I'm just going to, follow it, right? Because, you got to pay the bills. So what things did you feel you needed to get in place in order to say, okay, now we're fine to just go with one income?
Yeah, so at the time when my partner actually handed in his resignation, I was not getting consistent clientele. So prior to having children, like I said, running my business full time, it was all based on word of mouth. So I wasn't on social media. I did not have a website. It was just word of mouth. I knew that what I was doing was impactful. I knew that I could, gain clientele and attract clientele, but I wasn't consistently doing it for a number of years. So it was more or less like setting myself up again. So for us, it was looking at our budget. It was, and that was really scary for me because money has always been, being stable financially has always been something that has been incredibly not only important, but it almost caused a lot of anxiety for me to kind of take that leap. So I was a lot more anxious than my partner was. He was like pretty cruisy and really like supportive and just saw the vision. I was scared. So for us, it was, making sure that financially we were going to be okay on one income and being able to set those foundations. So I knew for me, social media was my first point of call, and then, establishing a website and then moving on from there. So that was kind of the process, but it was definitely scary. And I definitely had to be pulled off my emotional ledge, as you would say, quite a few times, because I was just, I was frightened, but I knew it was something that I needed to do.
So who are the type of people that you help, and what do you fundamentally do to support them?
So I help anybody that needs assistance. And so for me, my work motto is to help people see the light that they see in others, in themselves. So how I guess intend to create that sort of change is to do my work as an intuitive reader. So basically the work that I do is similar to that of, I guess, what we know as a psychic or a medium, but my work is different in the sense that I have no perception of what my clients look like. I also don't use any sort of tools like pendulums or cards. And the sessions are very similar, I would say, to like a therapy session, but you don't tell me anything. I kind of go through all the aspects of your life, anything that's holding you back, anything that's stopping you. And I can kind of see that intuitively and help people really, forge their way forward. And I guess do that by knowing themselves better and making those changes accordingly. So that's kind of like what a session looks like with me. And then I'm wanting to move into inspirational speaking and talking about my journey. So kind of incorporating those two things as well.
That is amazing. And do you have regular clients, or is it people that come and see you sort of more one-off when they need sort of a bit of guidance?
So I do have regular clients and then I do have one-off clients. So it kind of really depends on the client and what they're needing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to touch on your work with blind women provoking change. I read and heard that you felt a bit of discrimination by the fact that you don't look blind, as you would say, talking marks. And I want to hear a little bit more about that, and then the work that you the change that you're trying to provoke in that area.
Yeah, so I would say that I've never kind of like intended to go out and provoke change for blind women, but obviously know that the stuff that I put out on social media is going to kind of provoke some sort of shift and change in the blind community, specifically for women, because I am a blind woman and I am a blind mother. I think for me it was more or less using that aspect of me to share, because I knew that it would, I guess, bring change in a positive way, but attention to me and what I was doing. I guess, like I said, my main sort of intention is to help people make those changes within themselves. And I think for me, I come from a background where I did experience a lot of childhood abuse, sexually, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and a lot of complex trauma. And then on top of that, having a disability. So for me, I feel like my journey it almost felt like my journey was set up to make me fail, not make me thrive. And I had to make those choices to make me thrive and also put me to where I am today, mentally, emotionally, physically. So I guess for me, my larger message is it doesn't matter what you go through, who you are, where you've been, what dynamic you grew up in. If you want change and if you want fulfillment, you can create that for you, because for so long I felt like, because of my circumstances, my life was doomed. I felt like there was no fulfillment, there was no happiness, and that really stifled me. So I feel like my greater message is to kind of give that to the world, because I feel like it's something that everybody can relate to in some capacity.
Oh, when are you doing your TED Talk? Honestly. I'm down. Like, that literally gave me chills, what you just said. I just actually think you're so very inspiring. So, yeah, it literally gave me chills. I think you're an amazing person. And can be completely inspiring to, every single person listening and outside of our little communities as well. I ask every guest this final question. How has motherhood changed you as a person?
Oh, you're going to make me cry. Because I think for me, having my children was the greatest catalyst for my change. Coming from the dynamic that I come from, I put a lot of pressure on myself to, heal myself completely before I had kids. And as I know now, you never heal completely. It's a constant journey. And I think for me, my children brought things out of me I never knew were there. And some of those things were really frightening and hard to look at, but some of those things were really beautiful and amazing to kind of enjoy. And I think for me, looking at myself and my life through the lens of my children was the greatest gift, and they just have changed me in every way possible, and continue to change me. And I think it's that gift of self-reflection that they give, because I feel like children, they're not a Band-Aid, they're a mirror, and they reflect everything back to you. And no matter how hard it is to look at, it can also be such a great catalyst for change. So I think for me, that would be my answer.
Oh, friggin' drop the mic. Love it. How can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, so I am primarily on Instagram. My handle is at Ebony Uamaki, and that's where you can find me.
Love it. Thank you so much, Ebony, for your time and contribution today, and honestly for being so bloody inspiring. I think everyone listening will just sit there going, wow, it's just amazing to get good perspective on things and, realize that, you can step up and be the better version of yourself, regardless of where you've started or what you did yesterday. Today's the day that you can really step up and do that. And as you said, I mean, you've had a lot of things against you, call it, with obviously a really traumatic upbringing, and then obviously the disability and a lot of other things. And I think it's just amazing that you're not only there as a strong person yourself, but you are there inspiring, anyone who will listen, and in trying to get them to be the best version of themselves as well. I think it's amazing. And I thank you greatly for your time today, Ebony.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. Want to contribute to the conversation? Hit us up on Instagram at Parenthood Pod and join our Facebook group. Coming up next week on the pod.
The first bids being 20% over the guide price to now sort of looking down the barrel of all of these interest rate increases. So that's the thing that makes it difficult for us to kind of take the next step with our family and finding our family home.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening.
The Parenthood podcast would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we produce on, the land of the Wurundjeri people. We pay respect to their elders